Welcome back to the Metal Exchange. Justin and Chris here with you for another week, and this week it is the first Monday of the month, which means it is Request Monday here at the Metal Exchange. Judicators at the expense of humanity. But before we get there, Chris, my man, how are you?
Doing well. This was something I was not at all familiar with, so it'll be fun to talk about it.
That definitely makes two of us. I know it's been a while since we covered an album. We kind of rescheduled things a little bit. The Heaven's Gate episode, which we had promised, will be next week, and then the following week, I know you'll be picking an album, which I'm very curious about. But before we get there, some new stuff that came out. I know I had sent you the new Moonlight Haze album, which I really, really enjoyed. It was called Animus. They are like low key, really good at what they do. Kind of reminded me of Old Delane, which is never a bad thing, but they just a really, really solid album. I think you'd agree.
Yeah, I listened to it earlier today, and I enjoyed it quite a bit. And I listened to that along with the Ronnie Atkins newest album. Kind of all that listening to Conception really kind of backed me up on some of the newer stuff. So I got the chance to listen to those two albums today. I still have to sit down and listen to the new Shining Black album and the new Michael Romeo album as well. And also A Sound of Thunder, their new album came out. Actually, I don't know if it's out. I got it sent to me from the Kickstarter, but that album's called The Crimson Cult. So I have that to listen to. And then Trick or Treat's new album, Creepy Symphonies, dropped earlier today. I have to give that a listen to. Always enjoy Trick or Treat and the excellent vocals of Alessandro Conti, who also doubles as the vocalist for Twilight Force.
Yeah, well said. I haven't heard that yet. I'm looking forward to it. Did you get a chance to listen to the new Shaman single?
Yes, I enjoyed it quite a bit. That along with the new Seventh Wonder single, Shaman single called The Eye Inside, and Seventh Wonder, their single Warriors from their upcoming album, The Testament, which I believe is coming out in June. So happy birthday to me. Enjoyed both those tracks a lot, as well as the new Poets of the Fall single that came out today, Requiem for My Harlequin, which I also listened to today. And
fantastic.
Yeah. I mean, just what you would expect from Poets of the Fall, which is always good. And I gotta say, the new Evergrey single, like they're 2 for 2 on these singles. I might actually enjoy this Evergrey album, but they have a new single called Midwinter Calls, and it's a lot like the previous single, where it's just really heavy and catchy. So good stuff.
I'm tempted to pick it in the future if I can get my hands on a promo copy, just so I can hear your reaction to the rest of it. But I think I'll pick In Search of Truth instead, and we'll just go back into the archives. But story for another day. This week was really, really interesting. And before I get into this Judicator album, it came in as a request a number of months ago from one of the listeners, Jesse, who had hit us up on Facebook. I did not know at all what to expect from this album. And the reason I say that is I had never heard like barely a note from these guys. And the reason why is kind of funny. A friend of mine had told me years ago, probably 4 or 5 years ago, listen to Judicator. And I said, okay, and for whatever reason, I guess I forgot. And then the next week he said to me, did you listen to the new Judicator album? And I kind of blew him off again. I think this was around the time that like The Last Emperor had come out back in 2018. And he just kept berating me over and over. Did you listen to the Judicator? It's so good. It's so good. And then it was one of those things where he said it so much that I just made a point of not listening to them because I just almost didn't want to give him the satisfaction. And that's on me, I admit. But I never really went back and listened to any of this stuff because of him just pushing it so hard. So that's on me. And I'm happy that we got the request because I'm not sure I would have gone back and listened to this album from 2015 had it not been from one of the listeners.
Was it Pat?
Yeah, no, surprisingly not. But just as annoying with this. But obviously, he was a big fan of the band, and I'm really pleased that we had this request. And Jesse basically said that just a couple of words from him. I think he said it's the only album that I've ever listened to that makes me tear up sometimes, and he definitely did the first time. Music is great, production is good, but not too polished, and then you can tell that the emotion is there with the singer, and it's just being part of this bigger story that kind of makes it resonate for them. And I have to say, when I found out what the album was about, it was kind of pulled me back a little bit. It's kind of a concept album that details the story of the singer's, I guess, passing of his brother, who had struggled with a bout of cancer. I don't know how old the brother was, but obviously it's a very, very emotional tribute to John Yellen's brother. And it kind of just details what the family was going through and all the different struggles and all the different kind of crises that resulted as a result of the terrible medical diagnosis and obviously the effect on the family. I was shocked when I kind of read that, because it kind of just put everything in perspective, and it just obviously stops and makes you think a little bit. Yeah,
for sure. That's I wasn't aware of that, and I'm very sorry to hear that. That's a bummer. But I mean, it looks like they put out quite the tribute to their fallen brother, and that's what we're gonna talk about today.
Yeah, it's the band's third full-length release. They had started around, I guess it was 2009 or so, and I could be butchering that by a year or so, but apparently, I guess, actually, it looks like it's 2012 maybe. John Yellen, the vocalist, and guitarist Alicia Cordisco had met at a Blind Guardian concert, and I think that will be relevant when we start talking about the album. But they met at a Blind Guardian concert, apparently, and shortly thereafter released The King of Rome, which was their debut album. This was obviously their third album in 2015, based on everything that I had mentioned. The band has since gone through a couple of lineup changes, but at the time that this album came out, it was Cordisco on bass and guitars, Jordan Elsis on drums. He's still in the band. He's actually one of the two. He was in the band and remains in the band. And at the time, the keyboard player was Lorelei Laffey, who again is no longer in the band. So about half the lineup is still, intact. They've since come out with additional releases. Most recently, Let There Be Nothing in 2020. And I have to say, after listening to this album this week, I was blown away by how much I enjoyed this. I did not think I was going to enjoy it nearly as much as I did, in part because of that friend of mine who was just telling me to listen to it so much. And B, I did not know what to expect. And I was pleasantly blown away by this album. And I am going to make it my homework assignment this weekend. We're recording this on Friday night. I'm going to listen to the rest of the discography this weekend, because I was just blown away by this album.
Nice. Yeah. I remember that, that Glenn had them in his top 50, I think 2 years ago, when the Let There Be Nothing album came out. And I think that might have been the first inkling of the band being on my radar. And now I'm seeing that, I think I had done a YouTube search and saw that they had played at the Mad with Power Fest a few years ago. So yeah, I mean, I hate to say it, but like, I just feel like you're always a little bit wary when you find out that it's a band from the US, a metal band, I should say, from the US. 'Cause like, we're just not particularly known for our great under the radar metal bands. I mean, as in comparison to, the Swedens and the Finlands and the other European countries of the world. So especially with power metal, which seems to be kind of like a dying genre. It's always great to hear something like this that is from fellow, countrymen and women. And I enjoyed it a lot too. This band is definitely on my radar now, so I'm glad that we got a chance to listen to. Like sometimes an album is kind of a slog for me the first couple of times, and I feel like this one, it just kind of like it was enjoyable right from the beginning.
Yeah, I remember the first listen, and I really enjoyed it right away. I found it to be very dense that first listen, just like a very
It's a long
dense,
album.
yeah, dense and a meaty album. And I was kind of like taken back, not by anything other than just the fact that like as I was sitting there, I felt like I was almost struggling, even though I was enjoying it. But then with each subsequent listen, as I kind of got to know the music, my opinion didn't change because I liked it, but I just liked it more and more, and it didn't feel quite as dense as it did with that first listen. I was really surprised at the evolution of this disc over the course of the week. I think I probably listened to it 6 or 7 times.
Nice. Yeah, I'm curious where this album falls in the rest of the discography as far as like, is it, would it be our favorite, or I mean, this is officially the only album I'm familiar with now, but now I'm kind of curious, like you said, to kind of hear the other albums to see if they've grown as a band since the 2015 release. But yeah, this was really cool. I got at first I got like Blind Guardian vibes right off the bat. I mean, the vocals are like they're a little less over the top than Hansi, but similar in their kind of sound, kind of that range that Hansi tends to go to, similar in that way, and like the really like kind of thrashy guitars remind me of kind of that earlier Blind Guardian. But I mean, it definitely has some Blind Guardian vibes, but without like feeling like a Blind Guardian ripoff the way that maybe a Savage Circus did back in the day. It definitely has its own kind of flavor, but at the same time, you can tell that Blind Guardian was definitely some sort of inspiration for what this band was doing.
Yeah, I think that's well said. For me, obviously the vocals, to your point, harken, like a younger Hansi Kirsch, but at the same time, I didn't feel that the music was a complete copy. I think that they do their own thing a little bit. I think in certain areas they're a little more progressive, maybe a little more melodic too in certain ways, and the guitars don't have that same patented guitar sound that you hear from Blind Guardian, whereas Savage Circus, for obvious reasons, was a direct. I mean, obviously they shared members, so but it's that those first 2 Savage Circus albums were clones. I mean, if you weren't looking at the album, you would think you were listening to the new Blind Guardian. This is not that. It is certainly a nod to that German style, but it goes off in different directions, and I think that that's what I appreciated, because at this point, it's hard to clone Blind Guardian. They are, the kings of what they do. So it was nice to see them kind of borrow, but not steal from them, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure.
So, like I said, let's just kind of get into the album. Where I kind of went through the theme, if you will, before. The album opens with kind of an intro track called "Picture of Fading Light," and this kind of sets the stage for the album. It's a bit atmospheric, and ultimately the full band would be on display here before it kind of fades out into that opening track, "God's Failures." I'm curious to being that God's Failures is kind of like the first full-length track, what were your immediate thoughts when you kind of hear this opening riff and intro to the track?
I really liked how it kind of set up the whole album, kind of this really quiet, unassuming kind of instrumental piece that just all of a sudden builds and builds and builds. And then and then about a minute and 40 seconds later, you get the first full length track. But I really like that intro. I think that it really sets the table for, we talk about like, it's such a typical power metal move to have that kind of intro track, that instrumental kind of lead in. But I think it fits here perfectly. Like just kind of, starts you out nice and calm and then slowly gets you ramped up, and then just in time for this like first heavy track, God's Failures, to kick in.
Yeah, it's funny. This, American power metal gets such a bad rap, and there are just not that many great American power metal bands. But, in many ways, if the rest of the discography is as good as this, I could see these guys really being kind of like the flag bearers for American power metal. I hear a touch of other bands other than Blind Guardian, and I'll get to that in a little bit. This particular track I thought the verses were great. It was fast. It was heavy. I love how the bridge kind of faded out a little bit and then goes right into that heavy chorus. This is good stuff. It was a little bit paint by numbers for me, but overall I thought it was a really good opening track. Not my favorite on the album, but just a good way to kind of introduce you to the story and the whole premise of what this band is.
Yeah, I thought the layer, like kind of that layered vocal thing, like the background vocals in the chorus were very akin to what you would hear Blind Guardian do. But I wouldn't. This wasn't my favorite song either, but also it's also, I thought, one of the more memorable songs from the album. That said, I liked it a lot, and I think it also kind of painted a good picture of what to expect from most of the rest of the album, just kind of giving you a flavor of like what this band's all about right from the get-go.
Totally agree. We go into Cannibalistic Mind, which is the second full-length track, the third track on the album. It's a little bit under 5 minutes. Before I tell you my thoughts, do you have anything that stands out about this track for you?
I really enjoyed the kind of the bridge that goes into the chorus, but I thought this was a pretty cool. Again, like I'm getting that a bit of that Blind Guardian vibe again from the song, and it's especially those really like just big like layered vocal chorus type feels, I guess. But I like this song quite a bit too. I thought, off to a good start so far.
This is my song of the week. I've had this song stuck in my head probably since the second time that I heard it. I love the simple kind of opening riff that just permeates the entire song. And they kind of like towards the instrumental section, and I guess it's like maybe in the middle of the song, they kind of have a guitar solo that's laid over the same riff, that they had played earlier to start the song. Fantastic bridge, totally melodic. They even use some, I'll call them melodic death metal vocals in points where it's almost like these harsh vocals, which I wasn't expecting, but it kind of put a nice touch, especially when you consider the thematic elements of this album. I just thought it was a nice contrast. It was a little bit different, but I love this track. This and one or two others were in contention for Song of the Week, but for me, this is going to do it.
Nice. Yeah, that's a good choice. I like this song quite a bit too. The next track is actually my track of the week, Coping Mechanism. I like this one a lot just because of the it has that what do you call it, that tempo, that fast tempo,
that gallop that we talk about.
Yeah, exactly. It's always just this like just moving, this fast moving song, great vocals. I just thought this was super catchy, and this was kind of the one that was stuck in my head. So
two things that jump out about this track. Number one, the double bass drum I thought was a really nice touch and kind of just pushed this track along a little bit. And I thought that the keyboards kind of popped on this one for the first time, to this point on the album, which we hadn't heard. This one gave me a very heavy Demons and Wizards vibe. Like, to me, like, obviously, we talk about the vocals with Hansi. This, to me, wasn't so much Blind Guardian as it was Demons and Wizards, and that's never a bad thing. And we probably can't even utter the name of the band anymore, but, like, this was totally Demons and Wizards to me.
You say I'm angry.
Yeah, I definitely could see that. Yeah, I thought this was really good. This was the one that, whenever it came on, it just, my brain kind of snapped on and was just like, yep, here we go.
Nice.
Just your, just a good, like, tap your foot, just good stuff. I like this song a lot.
The interesting thing though is the beginning of the next track was really, really kind of unique on this album. The fifth track is called My Fantasy Destroyed. The intro is very Poets of the Fall or like 2000s radio rock. I mean, I don't know. I'm not even sure what the band I'm thinking of is, but you just take one of those like radio rock bands. It starts like so different. I was like not kind of expecting that. It's a bit of a mid-paced song, but it gets faster during the choruses and then slows down during the verses. Again, with that Demons and Wizards feel, I like this track a lot. It's a bit weird the way it's constructed, but there was something about it that was kind of catchy, and I think it was probably the change in tempos for me.
Yeah, I'm with you. It does have kind of that like alt rock kind of vibe. Oh, maybe even like a Fates Warning-ish kind of vibe at the beginning. But then like it just, again, kicks into kind of and I it's funny that you mentioned it. I didn't really think of Demons and Wizards. I just kept thinking of Blind Guardian, but you're right. Like stylistically, some of these songs do have more of a Demons and Wizards kind of vibe than a Blind Guardian vibe. And being that it's the same vocalist, I mean, you could kind of understand why that would be. But this was another really good track. I mean, I didn't, I'll just spoiler alert, I didn't dislike any of the tracks on this album, to be completely honest. So
yeah, to me, I think just like anything else, unless it's a perfect album, you're going to like some tracks more than others. But I didn't find myself wanting to skip anything. Whereas sometimes we'll get requests and there's certain songs where I'm like, all right, this is clearly like C-level material where there might be some better stuff on the album. I didn't find that with this one. And part of the reason is kind of tracks like Lucid Nightmare. It's the next track. It's nearly 11 minutes. It's kind of like the big epic track on the album. And this one is really proggy, right? This is not so much Demons and Wizards or Blind Guardian. This, to your point, maybe more Fates Warning. There's like folky type interludes that are going on in there. Awesome bass lines that for the first time on the album really popped, just in terms of like the instruments standing out amongst the others. I found this to be like a song that kind of gave everybody in the band a chance to shine. Kind of cool. And some of the guitar solos towards this, we'll say the 75% of the way through the song mark, there's these like spacey guitar effects that almost had like an Arion vibe to it. There was a lot going on here, but good track. Not my favorite, but there's elements of this song that I thought were really good.
I thought the keys really stood out on a song like this. Both kind of like the heavier parts, but also kind of in the middle where it kind of goes into like this almost like interlude in the middle of the song. I really like the kind of like the dissonance that they used in this kind of like low, kind of a lower end keyboard kind of solo here, where like basically all the instruments kind of bow out for a little while, and you hear the keyboard and the bass kind of in there. And I thought that was a really cool way to kind of break the song up, because like you said, it is, a 10-minute plus tune. But this is, I think, where the band separates itself from the bands that we kind of mentioned earlier, where like I think having a little bit of that progressive like vibe and throwing in some keyboards, which is not something you would typically hear in a Blind Guardian or a Demons and Wizards song, I think really kind of gives it its own flavor. And it's always tricky when you have a 10-minute song. You worry, is it going to drag, or is it going to be boring, or is it going to be one of those ones where you just can't wait for it to end, or you skip? And I didn't think that this was like that at all. I thought that it kept my attention all the way through. And I think it was also like kind of well placed right in the middle, early middle part of the album.
Yeah. It's almost kind of like, I when I listen to an album, I kind of break it up into parts, if you will. This was kind of like the end of side one, or like side A of the album. And the next track, Rain in the Meadow, is kind of like a slow interlude track, almost a vocal solo, which is kind of setting the mood for the B side of the album. Or at least that's kind of how I listened to it, how I kind of took it in.
Yeah, I wasn't ready to
expound,
but yeah, that's it pretty much hit the nail on the head. Yeah, just I like the way that you put that, where it just kind of, this is kind of that track that separates the two halves of the album. That makes complete sense.
We get into the next tune, which is Nemesis Fratricide, which is, I think when I first heard it, I don't know that I necessarily appreciated it so much, but this one definitely grew on me, and grew on me faster than all the other ones on the album. It's a very heavy tune. It's fast, but it's surprisingly melodic, a little repetitive, but as kind of like the kickoff to the second track or second side of the album, it has this kind of really warm, inviting tonality to it, which I kind of liked. There was something about just the way that this album was mixed I really, really enjoyed, but I thought that it really stood out on this track as we get into like the second half of the album. This was a good listen, and a track that, like I said, it grew on me, I think, more than any other.
Yeah, you wouldn't guess that this was kind of like a smaller band from the US, like based on how well the album sounds, production wise. And I have to say, the thing that I think that this band really, what really sets them apart is that I just find that the bridges and the choruses on almost all the songs are very memorable. They just have kind of a very catchy, and just the way that they sound with the layered vocals, it just just the way that the songs, the parts are written are just very memorable. That's the thing. Like when I go back and listen to these tracks and I get to those bridges and those choruses, I'm just like, yeah, there we go. That's that part. Like it really sucks you in. And I think that's, not always the case. Like some bands have a hard time, keeping that consistency throughout an entire album. And I feel like with this album, almost all the tracks have a very memorable portion of it. But I just think some of the vocal lines are just really, really memorable and just really good stuff.
Yeah. And to that point, I think that's actually a great segue to the next track, at least for me, Autophagia. The riff at the beginning, I did not like. I thought it was very, very similar to the track before it, Nemesis. But at the same time, once the riff kind of ended and the song kind of went into the verses and then the choruses, the rest of the song was amazing. And I thought it was one of the better choruses on the album. So it was almost like a love-hate thing with this track. But the chorus was so memorable and the vocal lines were so well done that it kind of made up for the fact that I didn't like the first 30 seconds, because I love the last 6 minutes of this track or thereabouts. I guess it clocks in at probably about 6 minutes and 17 seconds. So there's about 6 minutes of this song that I love. First 17 seconds I can pass on, but certainly not enough to ruin it for me, because it was just so good and the chorus was so memorable that it really made the track.
Yeah, and like, again, I like how the bridge just gets kind of quiet, and it's like, and then it just bursts into this like really heavy chorus. And again, like you said, just a really memorable, I like that they, like they'll go back and forth with the tempo and the volume and like there's so many different elements that, I think it just adds up to like this really pleasant listening experience where you're not just listening to the same basic thing for, an hour.
Yeah, I completely agree. The next track is called Life Support. This was interesting because this is kind of where the first time where you hear some female vocals on the album. Apparently it was a guest spot from, what is her name? Mercedes Victoria is her name. She's a female vocalist. She kind of just features on this track and this track alone. I thought that was a nice kind of contrast and again, something different. Having those dual layered vocals with both the male and the female vocals during the chorus, also a nice effect. This one kind of had a little bit of like an epica feel to it, albeit with like less of that symphonic thing going on. Interesting. Not my favorite track, but I kind of liked what they were trying to get to here.
Yeah. I like the the dichotomy of the female and male vocals, and then you also have some kind of like growls in there too. I mean, similar to Amaranth, only in the three kind of vocal styles. That's just kind of what it makes me think of, even though the song obviously doesn't sound anything like Amaranth. But yeah, another really cool track. And again, it does that thing where it just kind of slows it down and calms it down, and then just like picks up again. And I think that makes those heavier parts all the more memorable because they kind of come back from like this little rest area. So, I think it's cool how they do that. And it is kind of nice to just hear a different voice. Not that nothing against the vocals. The vocals are excellent. But just kind of hearing something a little bit more tacked on is just is a pleasant experience, I think.
Yeah, as the album begins to wind down, and especially like I said after the first listen, but as I really got into it, certain elements of certain tracks really popped, and I think it kind of made each one stand out on its own. Whereas sometimes albums kind of blend into each other. I thought every song was really kind of separate and distinct from the prior track, and that was one of the things that I loved. For example, the title track, the next track, At the Expense of Humanity, awesome introduction, very, very catchy.
I love how this one kicks on.
Yeah,
like it just grabs you right from the beginning.
And you expect right away that there's going to be some sort of a big payoff here, and there is. It's just that memorable melody that kind of gets stuck in your head. This is the song that I would want to see closing a live set if I got to see them live. I could see this being like an awesome end to their live set, and I've not seen them live, obviously. I went to see if they've played New York. I didn't see any tour dates coming up, so if you're listening, get over to New York so I can see you guys. But this is the one I want to see live because I just thought that this had this monumental sound to it that I think would really help close the set.
Yeah, the riff that just opens the song is just super catchy and memorable. And I keep using that word memorable, but I mean when it's a band I've known nothing about a week ago, and now it's like I have riffs and vocal lines like stuck in my head. I think that's memorable is the right word to use.
There you go. The final full length track is How Long Can You Live Forever, which I guess is a really good question. It's another epic track, almost 9 minutes. This was another one that kind of grew on me. The first couple of times I listened to it, it was right at the end of the album. It was kind of dense for me, and I didn't know if anything particularly jumped out per se. But with each listen, I kind of realized this is kind of the perfect concluding track before the outro. Just nothing, I don't know that one thing on this particular track jumped out. I just thought it was a nice, fitting conclusion to the album, and it didn't leave me wanting more per se because I felt like it was the total package.
I like the way that it starts off with a bit more of a mid tempo kind of vibe to it. I thought this was a good way to kind of cap things off, not counting the minute and a half outro. We have a couple of guest spots on guitar on this one. Jeff Teets from Mind Maze, who will be opening up Prague Power this year on Wednesday, has lead guitars on this one, or guest lead guitars, as does Carlos Alvarez of the bands Power Theory and Shadow Dance, who I'm not entirely sure if Shadow Dance is still doing anything. A little bit of help from some other American guitar players, which is kind of cool to share the wealth with. But this one I think was good because I think all the way through it kind of maintains that middle of the road tempo, which I think is kind of a nice way to kind of end things, because the album, for the most part, up until this point, has been fairly fast paced for most of the way. So this is, I think, a kind of a more of a pensive kind of track. I mean, based on the title alone, you would assume it's definitely got some philosophical vibes going on here, but good stuff, and a really, great way to end the album as far as the full length tracks go.
I wasn't 100% sure why they went with this kind of atmospheric outro to end the album. I didn't care for it that much, just because I thought that the final track was so good as a closer that maybe this wasn't needed. I'd be curious to see what the reason was there. Not that it's bad, it just almost didn't fit the feel of the rest of the album. And the only other knock, I guess, is I think it could have used one like outstanding ballad somewhere in there just to break up the pacing a little bit. But again, that's just me like kind of nitpicking here. Just a really, really impressive album. And I was so pleasantly surprised, and I'm so happy that Jesse had, kind of forced me to listen to it, because I don't know that I would have ever discovered them if it wasn't for that, just because I don't know. It was a gaping hole in my fandom. So thank you for pointing that out. I'd really like to catch them live sooner rather than later.
It's funny to me that somebody nagged you for years to listen to this band, and it took somebody requesting the album one time for you to go and listen to it. But
you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. But needless to say, like I said, my homework assignment is to listen to the rest of the discography this weekend, and I'm looking forward to it, because I'm not going to listen to it 7 times. I don't think I have that kind of time this weekend. But just from a academic pursuit, I have to hear more. This was really, really good, and I'm not going to waste any time. I'm just going to kind of go right from the beginning and go straight through.
I found it interesting that this was an album that was crowdfunded in 2014 through Indiegogo, which it feels like 8 years ago, like something like that wasn't nearly as common as it is today. Like, so
yeah,
it sounds like they were kind of on the forefront of that kind of fan. Well, I forgot what they call a fan.
Crowdfunding or whatever.
Yeah, crowdfunding. Thank you.
What's interesting is if you go on their Bandcamp page, obviously a lot of, supporters of the band kind of talk a little bit about what this album means to them. And what was interesting to me is almost everyone has like a different favorite track. And I guess that's kind of a testament to how good the album is, right? Because if everybody likes something different and the fans are obviously out there, kind of telling what they like and, what stood out to them, I think that's a good thing. I mean, we obviously had different tracks. There's other people on, like I see, that have many, many different tracks for many different reasons. I think it's a testament to the strength of the album.
Couldn't agree more. I mean, I think that's always a good thing when everybody has a different favorite song, because that just means that each song has its own kind of strength in its own way that somebody might just appreciate more than the next person. So I agree with you. That's definitely a pro, not a con.
Scale of 1 to 10. What are you rating this?
I give it an 8.0. I thought it was very solid, really strong, like really good. And I think, is just kind of opening up the can of worms, as far as this band goes, for both of us to kind of dig in and kind of catch up on what else we might have missed, and follow the band with whatever they do going forward.
Yeah, I have it as an 8.0 as well. And I think back to kind of, what was going on in 2015. And all I can say is if I had a top 50 list, this would have probably been on it, because it was just a really solid release that I would have kept going back to, which is all you can ask for. So I'm in complete agreement with you. It was a pleasant surprise. I'm glad we got to do it. And, like I said, next week when we go back to 1991, it'll be a little bit of a different feel, because it has kind of that older power metal vibe as opposed to this more modern style, which is, seen in, bands like an Iced Earth or something like that kind of, it was just more of a modern American style power metal as opposed to, what you're in store for next week. So
yeah,
that'll be fun.
It'll be an interesting change of pace to go from American modern power metal to early 90s German power metal. So.
Which is, I know, in your wheelhouse. So it'll definitely be
Hey, all power metal is in my wheelhouse.
That is also very, very fair. Just a couple of news items before we go forward. Just based on the way our recording schedules have kind of fallen, we didn't get to comment on the death of Foo Fighters drummer Taylor Hawkins. This was a complete shock to everyone, and obviously a terrible, terrible tragedy. Lesson learned, I never got to see them live, and it's one of those things where I always said, I'll catch them on the next tour. I actually had plans to go see them this summer because they were playing at Citi Field, and obviously they've canceled all their shows. This, for a modern rock band, they are as good as it gets as far as I'm concerned. The last 25 years, this was a blow, and you can see all the different musicians that have come out and kind of paid their own respects and tribute. Everyone from Mike Portnoy, Paul McCartney. I mean, the names, the list of legends is just incredible. But it's obviously very, very sad news, and it's just what can you say other than tragedy?
Sucks. I was talking to Knops about it, and it's like, he's like, when are we going to learn to just get off our asses and go see these bands? Because you just never know. It's like, I kick myself in the ass for never seeing Rush live, and I figure, I'll see the Foo Fighters eventually, and I believe we still will, but there's going to be a massive hole in that lineup with Taylor Hawkins passing away. It's just awful, and I can't even imagine what Dave Grohl must be going through, because I just know how close that those two guys were, and to just lose somebody that suddenly like that is just horrible. It was such shocking and horrible news, and I'm glad that you mentioned it, and I'm sure that we will do a Foo Fighters episode at some point, because they've always been low key one of my favorite non-metal bands, for sure.
I am totally with you, and I recently read Dave Grohl's autobiography, and it was interesting because he has a lot of if you read about his early days as a musician, I'm talking pre-Nirvana, he was into punk, and he was into like kind of extreme metal, which I guess makes sense given, obviously that album that he just released, which was a real trip if you haven't heard it, that kind of like death black metal album that he released out of nowhere, seemingly, but more so because even though the Foo Fighters were just kind of radio rock, there are elements of like hard rock and metal in there all throughout their songs, and just a fantastic band. And I think that one of those bands that anybody who enjoys rock music, no matter how heavy it is, has to appreciate them for what they are. I know a lot of bands get, criticized for certain things, but nobody seems to have a bad word about the Foo Fighters.
I wish that were true, but I know people that have
really
been unhappy with their last handful of albums. So, I guess different strokes for different folks, but I've followed, like I've bought every album they've done pretty much since the start. And I have a lot of fond memories of listening to, in particular, the One by One album that came out in 2002. That was just one of those albums that in college we listened to all the time, along with the Master Plan self-titled.
what a pairing that is.
Yeah, exactly. That's shout out to Knops, and
the Mayhem album that came out that same year. No, it's just what an eclectic mix of albums that is. But two great albums, just very, very different. So anyway, I do think we should do a Foo Fighters episode sooner rather than later. I think it would be a fitting tribute. And I have some stories to share too that I think would be kind of interesting. One other bit of news, which is a little bit lighter and quite frankly something that excites me tremendously. Skid Row has announced their new singer, Eric Grunwald, and the name may sound familiar. He is was the longtime singer from Heat, one of my absolute favorite bands of probably the last 10 years. I had no idea this was happening. As far as I knew, Z. Peath Art was still their singer, but apparently not, because Eric Grunwald joined the band and has already played a bunch of shows with the band, and I saw some live clips, and I have to go see Skid Row. I think those first two Skid Row albums are phenomenal. I've been listening to them for 20 plus years, even though they came out 30 years ago now, but just fantastic stuff. And his voice is so good, and it just lends itself so well. He kind of reminds you of a young Sebastian Bach. And I say that as the biggest compliment I can give, because for a short period of time, he was the voice of metal.
Again, no arguments here. I look forward to hearing that. Skid Row is one of those bands that I'm definitely not as familiar with as I probably should be.
They're on my list. We'll get to them. They're on my list.
Of real obvious songs like 18 in Life, and there's another one.
Slave to the Grind, Monkey Business.
No, I don't know. I'm blanking on it, but I probably would know some of those songs if I heard them. But again, it's
Youth Gone Wild, I guess, would probably be
the one.
Yeah, I figured those are kind of like the four biggest songs or whatever. But
Youth Gone Wild's a real good song.
Oh, no argument here. I think we'll definitely get to them. But it was almost breathing life in this band that I had kind of stopped paying attention to, because there's just so much other stuff. But I'm paying attention now. I have to go see them live, so it should be fun. Yeah.
I think we really should learn to just go see bands.
There you go. Lesson learned. But there you have it. It was a fun week. I'm glad we got to do Judicator. We'll do Heaven's Gate next week. If anybody has requests, keep them coming. We've got a couple in the chopper for the next couple of months, but we always welcome new ones. And like I said, we can always do more than one a month if they continue to come in fast and furiously. So leave us a positive review if you think we deserve it. It helps other people find us, which is obviously fantastic. And we look forward to hearing everyone's thoughts on Judicator, just as we will be obviously sharing some songs this week with, Cannibalistic Mind and Coping Mechanism.
Yeah, and we also just want to quickly point out that we have a couple of changes to the Prague Power USA lineup. Yes. We had said that we were going to talk about the replacement for Brothers of Metal, but we hadn't gotten a chance to do that yet. Glenn Harveston, who was the promoter of Prague Power and former guest of the Metal Exchange, which is probably a way more bigger honor for him. He announced on a live stream that Riot 5, formerly known as Riot, would be filling in. And another band that I am very, very ill-prepared to see live. I do not know very much by this band, but they have been around for a very long time. They were formed in 1975, so that should be interesting. I'm definitely going to give them a listen before we head to Atlanta, just to see if it's going to be my kind of thing. And then another thing, we just found out that Arch Echo bowed out. They had been opening for Dream Theater on their U.S. tour. They canceled their upcoming tour, and I don't know what the story is with them, but they are not going to be playing at Prague Power. They've been released by the Siberium, which is a prog rock band from Chicago. I haven't had a chance to listen to them, but again, that's another one that's going to be, I'm going to check out before we go. But just a couple of changes. This lineup has pretty much had so many changes in the last 2.5 years for however long it's been announced for. So, at this point, nothing is really coming to a surprise. And I think most of the people that have decided that they're going are going to go no matter who plays, ourselves included. So,
but in 2 months, we will be at a metal festival again. So it will all be worth it one way or another.
Yeah, for sure. And cheers to the new bands that have made their way onto the list. I saw a lot of people were very happy to hear that Riot was added. So that's good news. And hopefully a lot of these bands that were supposed to play this year or last year or the year before or whatever get invited back, because I know I was excited to see Beast in Black, and I was excited to see Night Flight Orchestra, and I was excited to see everybody that would eventually replace Beast in Black, including Unleash the Archers and Brothers of Metal. So yeah, let's just hope that some of these bands, get an invite back. I'm sure, I'm sure you would feel the same way about The Ocean and Artificial Language and some of the Prague bands as well. You could make a sick lineup just out of the bands that were at one point booked for this festival. So
there were bands like The Gathering. They were bands.
I didn't even mention Power Quest.
Yeah. You could make a very, very nice festival just out of the cancellations, but I'm not going to go there. I have a feeling that many will be back in some way, shape, or form. So we'll see what happens. Well, fingers crossed. I don't think it's the end. I just think it's a different year, and then next year will be a return to form, if you will.
Yeah, I think I had a brief discussion with Glenn, and I just said, you know what? I think this year is more just going to be about catharsis, I think, for a lot of people, just to go back to doing something that feels normal. And I think that's going to be kind of a big deal for everyone. And I think that is going to be, the biggest takeaway as far as the fans go, is that
I could not agree more.
Back amongst all the people that we don't get to see all the time and that we look forward to seeing every year that we haven't seen now in years. A lot of things. So it's something that I fingers crossed nobody else drops off the lineup, but I'll be happy with whatever, whoever plays.
Well said. With that, enjoy the week, and I will catch you next week when we go back to Living in Hysteria by Heaven's Gate.
Okay. If you want,
you got something else?
We could push that episode ahead a week and discuss the story career of The Undertaker, who's going into the WWE Hall of Fame in about 2 hours. So
yeah, let me sleep on that. I'll get back to you. No, we'll give him his special.
Why don't you rest in peace and get back to me?
I will talk to you soon, bud. Enjoy the weekend.
Have a good one.